Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. So welcome back to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and this is our third installment of Marie Antoinette. We've covered a lot of information, but this is getting down to the sad part of the history where the French Revolution happens, and a lot of information comes out of this episode. So I'm going to let Claudine jump in with the French Revolution and what happened to Marie. I think we all know.
Sadly, we do all know kind of how it ends. So there's, we don't want to do a spoiler alert, but it doesn't end so great.
That was like when my dad watched the movie Titanic. Actually, he didn't watch it. And he was like, I'm not going to watch it because I know how it ends. The boat sinks. But there's much more than that to this episode of Marie.
Yes, there's much more to that. But yeah, so for Marie Antoinette, towards 1789 is when things started to get pretty serious. In the spring, the Estate General had opened up, and when they started speaking, one of the men just had this brutal attack against her, like just saying these horrible, horrible things. It was after the affair of the necklace. She was in a lot of ways, I think that she was just a big scapegoat for a lot of things. A lot of things were blamed on her. So, the Estate General was just railing against her. It was pretty horrible. So just on June 4th that same year, their oldest son, the Dauphin, Louis Joseph, died.
In prison?
They weren't arrested yet. So he was only 8 years old. So this was their very first son that they had. So their second child, first son. So he ended up dying. He had a lot of, I'm actually writing about it today because it is June 4th. So he ended up he had a lot of issues. Like he ended up having, they built basically kind of like a metal, how would I say it? Not like crutches, but like a whole system that would basically hold his body up. Mm-hmm. And he kind of had like a wheelchair that he was attached to so he could get around. So he had issues for a really long time. He died when he was 8 years old.
Oh, that's so sad. So I guess we don't really know what disease he had, but basically he wasn't able to walk.
Yeah. And there's a really sad painting of that they had done with him when he was a baby, and with the family, with all four kids. And they ended up later going and covering him up, painting.
Oh, they just erased him?
Yeah. It's pretty sad.
That's super sad.
Yeah. So because of everything that was happening and with the Estate General, they couldn't have a service for him like they would like to. They couldn't have a big service in the church. They couldn't do a big burial at Saint Denis. So they ended up just basically having to kind of just keep it to themselves and just kind of mourn the loss of their son on their own. And then, he was sent to Saint Denis where he was later buried. But, they couldn't be seen spending all this money.
Mm-hmm. With everything happening.
Yeah, with everything going on. So Marie Antoinette, at that time, she started to kind of panic. So this is now the summer of 1789. She kind of started to panic. She was burning her papers. She was gathering up her jewelry. She was sending some of it off to family members in Austria. She was trying to convince Louis, like, we need to leave. Like, we need to leave Versailles and go someplace else. But he didn't want to.
Why did we ever find out why? He just believed he didn't need to?
He didn't think he needed to, and he wanted, to stay with his country. As we know, he should have left.
Bad idea. Bad idea.
Yeah. So at the beginning of October, on October 1st and October 3rd of 1789, two huge banquets were held in Versailles. And one of them was organized by the bodyguards and the military, and they had this huge banquet. And then 2 days later, they had another huge one for the Flanders Regiment that had come down to Versailles. And so they had these huge parties. Well, this gets back to the people of Paris, and they are not happy because the people in Paris are like starving. They don't have food. They don't have bread. They're really hungry. And here they are at Versailles, just living in the lap of luxury, having this giant party with, endless food and wine.
Yeah, that's not looking good for the people.
It's not really, and especially like, if that was now, they would know instantly that's happening. I don't think they probably, it probably took a little bit for the word to get to Paris that was happening.
Yeah. At least they had a little more time on their hands without Instagram showing off their lavish dinner.
Exactly. So then 2 days later, on October 5th, a rally was held in front of the Hotel de Ville. And they wanted to go there and challenge the government that was in the Hotel de Ville about everything that was happening because, they have no food. So this group of like 1,000 people broke into the Hotel de Ville and stole more than 600 weapons.
Wow.
Yeah. So then they were not happy. So first thing before dawn, several thousand women decide to leave and to march to Versailles.
The women led it.
Yeah, the women led it.
Interesting. Is that because everyone hated Marie Antoinette? They're like, let's go get the lady.
Well, part of it was that they thought that, the guards are not going to, instantly attack if it's a bunch of women. So they thought that it'd be a little bit safer sending the women in than they would be sending, the men right to there. And the women were the ones that were like in Leal, and they were the ones in the, in the stores trying to like, we don't have any food for our families.
They're the ones feeding everybody. They know firsthand.
So it took over 5 hours of them walking in the pouring rain.
So now we know how long it takes to walk to Versailles from Paris, guys. If you don't want to take the RER, 5 hours.
5 hours. Maybe it'd be a little quicker now because maybe there's like some paved roads and things.
Not walking through the forest. Actually, it might be more difficult now because there's cars everywhere.
That's true. Yeah. I think that there are like companies that actually you could ride your bike out to there, which just, I don't know. I just envisioned like going down the periphery on your bike.
Sounds like you want to kill yourself.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Terrifying.
No. So once they arrived to Versailles, they went to the National Assembly and they had a spokesperson that was on their behalf, and his name was Stanislaw Maillard. And he went in there and demanded bread and flour and to open up the causeway to let the people come in and to bring the flour. Because at the same time, they were like, we don't understand why there's a problem. Like there was plenty of flour at that time. There was plenty of wheat. There was plenty of all these things. Why wasn't it in Paris? We still kind of don't know from everything I've ever read.
Oh, really? Because I thought it was that they had a bad harvest that year and there was a shortage in general, but I guess that wasn't true. They had enough.
They had enough, but it just wasn't coming into Paris. So they ended up going, and the assembly leader actually went to the king and took like 12 of the women with them. And so they didn't know this. And one of the women, like at the side of the king, like fainted.
Oh, wow.
And so they're in Versailles, and Louis the 16th is just like, yes, I totally agree. He signed the papers and said, yes, let's do this. Let's get this in there. So, but then overnight, all of these people and protesters. So after the women came, then there was more, like men, and they were bringing carts filled with people and like a cannon, and all of this stuff came in. Well, they were all standing outside of Versailles all night, picketing and yelling while, the royal families and they're sleeping. And at 6 a.m. on October 6th, they finally get so fed up that they get into an altercation with some of the guards, and they just storm through the gate, get into Versailles, and then demand the queen. So they're in there and they're like yelling, we need to see the queen. We want to see her. And, they're terrified because, they also killed 2 of her guards that were, their sole job was to keep her safe. They killed her.
Great job, guys.
Yeah. They put us, this is a big thing they like to do back then, was like cut off their heads and put it on a stick and carry it around, which it's so gross. It's so
sounds like even more terrifying. You get an angry mob and then your bodyguard's head is on a stick. Not good news for you.
Yeah, no, I'd be like, wouldn't want to be anywhere underneath that stick. So they were screaming and calling for her. And so finally she decides, I'm going to go out there. And she goes out on the balcony all by herself and just stands there. And, they were basically like calling for her arrest, calling for her death. Like it had to be terrifying.
I can't even imagine, especially since she had kids. I mean, she still had 2 other kids to fend for and her husband. That just sounds terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, they were in their rooms. And the great thing about Versailles, when you go to Versailles, if you look closely, there's all these kind of hidden doors in most of the rooms. And, it looks just like the wall. It's got the same molding. It's got the same, wallpaper. But you could tell, if you look closely, it's a door. And those doors all have back passages. And so she was able to take with her kids to run through the back passages to get to Louis XVI's room. When they got there, the door was locked. They couldn't get in. And so they were just banging and yelling and screaming till somebody finally heard them and they were able to get out. But the crowd demanded, they were like, no, you need to come out. We want you out here. So
we can like rip you apart and cut your head off.
Yeah. So they were like, we want you back in Paris. We want to be able to keep an eye on you. So, get out here. So at 11 a.m. on October 6th, they all ended up getting into these carriages and they left Versailles for the very last time.
So did they go with the crowd or they were making a run for escape?
They went through the crowd because with the crowd was also a bunch of different, revolutionist, military members that were just like, no, we're taking you back.
Oh, so it was kind of government as well that were saying, look, you got to be in Paris. Stop hanging out in your beautiful castle.
Yeah, it wasn't just, 2,000, these angry men and women going, get over here.
Come outside.
Yeah, I think that would be terrifying. But, so they went to Paris and they put them up into the Palais des Tuileries that was there, at the end of joined the Louvre for one time. And the mayor of Paris met them there and they greeted him and they gave him a key to the city. And, everything was okay. Everything was fine. They were staying in there. There was people watching them and they were doing, okay for 2 years.
2 years they were like, oh, I didn't realize it was so close together. I thought they stormed the castle, took them out, and bam, you're dead. But this was 2 years of them hanging out in the Tuileries castle.
Yeah. So they were in the Tuileries and they were there. And, it wasn't exactly life at Versailles, but, they were still in, a palace and, they were still, it wasn't, horrible. So, but they, at the same time, they were just like, we want out of here. So, for a while, like a lot of people suggested that they, escape. And so finally, Marie Antoinette and her friend, and I think lover, Alex Don Fersen, she had him help organize a escape for them. And so she put people, there was people that he would trust and she would trust to get together to, create this plan for them to go up to the north of France where there was still like a lot of people that were royalists that still believed in the crown, that still believed in Louis XVI. They thought they could get there and they'd be safe. So she had Alex, put this whole thing together. He made this like really, really fancy coach for them to travel in that even had a bathroom. I mean, it was like, you were
living the RV life.
It was an 18th century RV. That's right. They ended up like they had this whole thing planned. They were supposed to leave on June 19th, 1791, but then she canceled it at the last minute because she had one of her ladies that was also, she was like, no, she's kind of, a pro revolutionist. And she's like, no, I think we should wait. And, Alex was just kind of like, back then it's like they've put a lot of work to get all these people along the route on the way there that they were supposed to be, the manning it so that when they got there, they could switch out the horses, that they could do all these things. And here at the last minute, she's like, well, yeah, let's wait a day.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so stupid. And where were they trying to get to anyway?
It was a little tiny town in the northeast of France.
So they thought they'd be safer in the northeast of France than in Paris?
Yeah, because the people there were like still really supportive of him. where, a lot of the country was getting farther and farther away from actually supporting them. More it was actually not supporting her. He still wasn't really thought of as this horrible, horrible person.
So Marie was taking all the heat.
Yeah. Oh, she took all the heat. Yeah, for sure.
Because he didn't really do anything.
No, I mean, she wasn't perfect in it, but like I said, I think she definitely is a scapegoat. I think everything gets blamed on her when, not all of it was her fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but they, had this whole thing planned out. They ended up like, okay, they had them dress up as like servants. And so they didn't obviously look like, the king and queen of France. Louis XVI, before he went to sleep, his main man would sleep close to him with a string attached to Louis XVI's wrist. So whenever Louis would get up or move, that his man would be like, oh, what do you need? What do you need? So Louis had to do this whole thing, in his bed, luckily had curtains on it. And so, the guy went down and laid down, and he had to take the string off of his wrist, and he kind of tied it to his bed, just like, as kids, you might, stick the pillow under your bed.
Stick the pillow under the blanket. Yeah. I had no idea he was tied to a dude.
Yeah. So anytime, so strange. But yeah, so anytime he'd get up, they'd be like, oh, what do you need, sir? What do you need? They had to dress up as like, basically, common people. And they all took these different identities. Alex von Fersen had passports made for them with different people's names on it. They were supposed to be this family. They were on their way back to Russia. And they, like the daughters and also, or their son and daughter, and then also Louis XVI's sister, Madame Elizabeth. And so they all are supposed to leave. They all kind of left the Tuileries at different times. Like she took one of the children, he took the other, but they were supposed to meet this one place. Well, Marie Antoinette got lost on the way.
Typical woman.
It's like literally like the Tuileries is, basically, it's not there anymore, but it's basically at the end of the Louvre. She was basically supposed to go like 3 blocks.
Oh, and she got lost.
And so because of that, then she finally gets there. They were in this teeny tiny coach that wouldn't attract a lot of attention. So they go to this other place to get to the big fancy RV. And at this point, like they're not there yet. They're just like, where's the coach? We need to go. By the time they showed up, they ended up putting them 3 hours behind schedule.
Oh, they messed everything up. It's so important.
I know. It's just like you just read this and you're like, oh, those 3 hours. Maybe they could have saved your life.
Yeah.
So they ended up leaving. They ended up going through these little different towns. They stop at one, the Ville Maison, this little tiny town. And the innkeeper thinks, that guy looks kind of like this guy that's on my coin in my pocket. And, they just leave. They go on to the next place. They get to the next town and the postmaster sees them and also recognizes the king. And then that's when he let the gendarmes know and let the military know. And then the word got back to Paris.
So they didn't get very far, it sounds like.
No, and Louis had left like a 16-page letter on his bed that they found, the next day. So when they, later on that day, when they woke up, when everybody else woke up, they realized they were all gone. So they knew they were gone.
What did that letter say? Just like, oh, sorry for leaving, guys. Got stuff to do.
It had all sorts of stuff about, his love of France and his love of his country and the love of his people. And, it's a very, I think there's actually a copy of it in the, there's the Musée Archives, I think it is. That's right. It's really close to the Carnavalet. And they have nobody ever goes in there. It's really amazing. And they have a bunch of different, they actually have a copy of a letter that Marie Antoinette wrote.
Oh, interesting.
It's not the original they have up in the case, but it looks like it is. It doesn't look like it's a photocopy, but
yeah, exactly.
But it's really, really interesting. So, but anyway, so they ended up, 2 days later, the word got to Paris. And so then they said, the National Guard went there and they're like, we're bringing them back. Once they got back, then they were under complete lock and key. They were watched at all times. Somebody was with them all times. So they're back in the Tuileries. And then just a couple months later, the people get mad again. And they storm in through the Tuileries and they basically just are looking for them. They killed all the Swiss guards that were there to watch the family. The family was actually able to get out and they ran through the Tuileries and got to the National Assembly, which is, just right kind of opposite the Place de la Concorde.
Yeah, not far at all, really.
No, so they ended up being able to hide there. he was still treated like they gave him wine, they gave him all this food, and basically Marie Antoinette and her children, they were just kind of like, they could have cared less. So it was but as they left, that was basically the end of it. As they're basically running through, that's the end of the monarchy. That's the end of everything.
And why were the people angry again? Because they were mad they had tried to escape. Things weren't getting better in Paris. They still didn't have enough food.
Yeah, they were really mad that they escaped because they thought, we did this. We brought you to Paris. We're giving, this, we still
second chance.
We're giving you this chance. And you guys basically so blatantly were like, peace out.
Yeah, later.
We're out of here.
Anymore.
Yeah.
Do you have any information about why they wanted to leave? Like they just want to get back to Versailles? They didn't want to be the king and queen anymore? Like why did they leave?
I think that they knew that things were going to, they weren't in a good situation. I think that they knew things were just going to get worse. Mm-hmm. And that, they just wanted to be able to be free. It's funny, like over time, so many of them have done this, Napoleon III, all of these, there's so many of these rulers that just were like, we're out of here. They'd run off. I mean, Charles de Gaulle did the same thing. He ran off to London, where he, and that's where he kind of did everything from World War II from the side of France. But, so many of them were just like, we're leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're done with this. Well, I think if I had some dude tied to me at all times, I'd be like, yeah, I think I'm over the whole king thing.
Yeah,
I'm just going to live the peasant life.
Yeah, literally tied to you all the time.
Yeah, like simple life. I don't need anybody in my bathroom time. Like, not cool.
No. But the next day after that, they were taken to the Temple prison. And then that's when things started to get pretty bad. So they were taken to the Temple prison. And then just a few months later, on January 21st, 1793, Louis XVI was beheaded.
Mm. So it was pretty quickly after.
Yeah, it was pretty quickly after. So there, at that time, Marie Antoinette, his sister, Madame Elizabeth, and their son and daughter all together in the prison. And so they were all able to still be together. They actually ended up having very close. They actually had like a really nice time that they were able to spend with the whole family. And they would teach the children geography and all these other things. And, that it was nice for them to actually finally be together. Horrible situation, of course. But then later that summer, the Dauphin, who now he's technically Louis XVII in a lot of ways, if they recognized a king, he was taken from Marie Antoinette. He was moved into a cell down below. And this shoemaker named Simon was basically kind of trying to teach him. They were worried that, okay, well, he's now, technically Louis XVII. We need to try to change, he's just a little boy. They're like, we need to change his thoughts. We need to basically brainwash him into the Republic ideals and everything. So they kept him separate from her. She wasn't able to see him at all. Later on, at the beginning of August, Marie Antoinette was then taken the Temple prison and taken to the Conciergerie. It was the last time she got to see, the day before was the last time she got to see either one of her children or her sister-in-law, and was taken to the Conciergerie, which they used to call the antechamber of death.
Oh, does not sound promising.
No. So she was placed in a cell. And she actually, while she was at the Conciergerie, she was actually treated better than she was ever treated at the Temple. The guards would use their own money and buy her flowers. They would go and get food for her. They'd bring her food. And she was, treated much better. She even had a dog.
Why were they nice to her? What changed?
Yeah, I think that they, I think they felt pretty sorry for her. She had become at that point, everything we had talked about in early episodes about her, her mother, who was kind of a monster, everything that her mother wanted her to become, Marie Antoinette ended up becoming during this time. She ended up like how to, basically carry herself, what was important, the role of being, the Queen of France, all of these things, to get rid of all of her frivolous notions. Like she never would read a book before. But once she got to the Conciergerie, she was reading everything. Like she just had a much different way of looking at her life. And it was kind of what her mother had always wanted her to do.
She grew up in prison.
Yeah, she had to grow up.
What about her mother? Did they try to do anything during this time? Do we know if her mom was trying to break her out or something?
Her mom had passed away. Her mom had passed away a few years before that. But she, had reached out to her family in Austria, and she was trying to get back to, trying to convince them to get her and to take her back. Her one brother ended up, that was the emperor of Austria, ended up dying. So then she was kind of, at that point, they kind of didn't really care.
Oh, it's terrible. So she's basically abandoned by her family and her new country.
Yeah. And there was a couple like different, like there was called the Carnation Plot, where this one man wanted to try to break her out. So he came in to see her, and he had brought a carnation, and a note was wrapped around it, and he left it for her. And he said, like, don't worry, we're going to come get you out. I'm going to bring money. We're going to give it to the guards, bribe them. And then one of the guards ended up deciding, he reported it because he was terrified that, he'd be killed. So it ended up kind of like that, they told that he routed her out. And then basically, like, she was in this one cell. And if you go to the conciergerie, you could go see the two different cells she was in. And it's just like kind of heartbreaking. But the first one she was in didn't even have like a door. It had like a curtain, and it had a bed for one of the ladies that kept an eye on her, and one for the guards. And she was, pretty free to move around as much as you possibly can in that situation. But after the plot happened, they moved her to another one, which basically had a tiny, tiny window that had bars on it. So she could it was basically like, 12 by 12. And she could look out there. And then at that point, they took everything. They took her jewelry from her ring. They took anything, like even took candles from her, pens and paper. They took everything from her.
So she became a real prisoner. Before it was kind of like the Holiday Inn. Yeah. And then she moved into a Motel 6.
Yeah, it was, it was the Martha Stewart prison there for a little bit. But, she, at this point, this is, also towards, getting towards the end. So she, by that October, she was on trial, and they took her on trial, which, was kind of a farce to begin with, because she was going to be convicted no matter what. Even the jury, at the time was just basically like, even if they didn't agree, they were told, like, if you don't basically convict her, you will die too. So she ended up having to go to trial. A few weeks before she went to trial, Simon, the shoemaker, sent a letter to the court saying that the Dauphin had confessed that his mother and his aunt had sexually abused him, slept with him, just horrible, horrible things. So they convinced this little boy to say these things about his mother.
How old was the little boy?
He was only like 9 years old.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah. So they convinced him to say all these things. They ended up going to trial. She didn't know anything about this until they were at trial, when they announced it. And she just was like, at that point, she got up and said, she looked at the ladies in the court and said, I am a mother. You have, I could not have done this to my son. And some of the women were actually really touched by it, but the court just was like, nope, we don't care.
Yeah, this is what we're here to do. We're going to behead you.
Yeah. So, it only took her 2 days, like 2 days later, this was, her trial started on the 12th. By the 15th, she was convicted. And on the 16th, the next day is when she was going to get killed.
That's so sad. I feel like there's a little more information about what happens when she actually walks up there that we should save for our next episode.
There is a lot.
There's quite a bit of information. So I think that's a good place to end for today, because you need to know what happens when she walks up those steps, and also what happens to her children. I mean, I'm fascinated about what happened to the royal children after all this. So tune in next week to hear the rest of the story.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.